Hello everyone, my name is Frums, and in this tutorial we'll be looking at the keyboard input, the mouse input, and last but not least the controller input. Now the first thing we're going to look at is how we're going to get any of the input at all. Now I've cleared our game here, and the first thing we're going to need is the input. Now what we're going to do is we're going to retrieve the input from the container. And the way this works is that Slick2D has a whole class for getting all the different inputs, and they're all the information is stored in the input object. Now the input object gets its input from the container, which is, just save this up, which is this window here. Our whole window here is our container. Now what we can do with the input is we could say, let's say we want to write something to the screen whenever we're pressing the spacebar. So if the input dot is key down or key pressed, there's two methods here for the keyboard. First of all is the key down. This one is true whenever a certain key is down, and it will be true whenever the key is down. The difference between the is key pressed is that the key pressed is only true for one update. So essentially this will be true for every time you press the spacebar and let it go again. So the main difference between those, so let's get the key pressed, and every key has its own code. Now if you look at your keyboard will have a lot of keys, and well, every key is its own code. Luckily Slick2D has a lot of keys predefined in the input. So you say input with the capital I, and as you can see all the keys defined here. Now we're going to use the key space, and whenever we press this we would want to set a boolean. So let's say spacebar pressed is false, and whenever it's pressed it's going to be true. Now what we're going to do here is going to say space pressed, and let's draw some basic shape here, or let's draw a string. Somewhere on the screen, and start it up again, and once I press the spacebar we should see spacebar pressed. Now if we want this to only appear when we are holding it down, or actually rather only when we're spamming the spacebar, we can just do simply like this. As you can see, I have to spam it quite hard to get it to appear, because it'll be false every other update. And as you can see, we have a lot of updates here. So if we change this to is key down, I can simply hold the spacebar down, and you can see that spacebar is pressed whenever I'm holding the spacebar down. Those are the main two methods that you can use for the keyboard. There's also another way of doing this, and this is using the override methods of basic game. Now basic game is a class that has a lot of methods. It includes the init, update and render, and as you might remember, when we extended from basic game we had to implement these. Now basic game also has a few methods for input. However, not every game needs every single input. So for example, not every game needs your key down or your key pressed. However, we can extend those methods as well, or rather override them. And to see which methods we have, we can simply type this dot. And what this basically means is we're gonna call a method from our own class. And you can see a few methods for controllers, and there are two methods for the keyboard here. Now you can see they're currently situated in basic game. If you look at the init, it's in setup class. So what we need to do is we have to override this method, and it needs a key and a code. So let's say public void key released, and the key is an integer and the code is a character. Now let's get rid of this. What this does is whenever a key is released, this method is called. So instead of checking every update if a key is released, it's gonna only call this method whenever that event happens. So instead of using something to draw on the screen now, we're just gonna print it into the console here. So let's say let's print the key and print the code. Now if we start this up and I press any key now, you can see apparently D has the code of 32. Now the code is the actual character code of your key. So if I press Shift D, you can see first of all I release the D key and then I release the Shift key. As you can see, the Shift doesn't have an actual character, so it has a space. The same goes for spacebar and every other key that doesn't actually have a value or a character code attached to it. Now there's also a method for the key pressed, and this basically does the same as the key pressed from the input. Now you might be wondering, is there also a key down? No, there's not, because this method is event based, and this is not necessarily an event. This could be something that will last for a long time if someone is holding spacebar down for a long time. So what you have here is the input here has this method. However, the input over here does not know which code the key pressed is. So both have their advantages and disadvantages, and it really depends on what you want to achieve with these methods. So if you want to have the actual difference between capital letters, you might want to consider using this, but if you need to have a key down, you will have to use this. So that's it for the keyboard. Now let's take a look at the mouse. So for the mouse, we're gonna use the input once again, and let's call this mouse clicked. There we go, and let's rename this as well to mouse clicked. Now for the mouse buttons, it's very much the same. So if we say if input is mouse button pressed or down, you can again use the input. There's all the keys here, but this time we want to use mouse left button or mouse middle button or right button. This is limited to these three buttons over here. Again, limitation of input. We will see later that we can use the other mouse buttons that are on our mouse as well. What we can do here is, let's say mouse clicked is true. And again, mouse clicked is false. Let's not do that yet. And once we run our game, I can click my mouse everywhere that's not in the screen or on this part. But once I click here, you can see I click the mouse. Now again, mouse pressed and mouse down are work the same as with the keyboard. So also again, you can see mouse clicked, mouse release, mouse pressed over here. Now the mouse pressed and mouse released are the same as this method. However, the mouse clicked also has a click count, and notice that mouse clicked, mouse pressed and mouse released has a integer which indicates what button it is. So let's take a look at the mouse clicked, and let's override that method. Public void mouse clicked, and what's interesting here is not necessarily the X and Y, because it should be obvious what they do. Whenever I click somewhere, it's gonna tell me what position in the screen I clicked. What is interesting is which button I used and how many times I clicked. Now, what you can use this method for is determine if someone is double clicking. And to do that, we're just going to say and print to our console and let's say this. Now what you're going to see now is whenever I click, you can see 0 is our left mouse button, right click is our right mouse button, middle click is our 2 is our middle mouse button, and if I use other keys or buttons on my mouse, you can see that this is the back and forward button, and as you can see, you can use those as well. They're simply not implemented in the input, so you can actually put 3 in here as well, and what you will see is whenever I press my back button, you can use this method as well. They're simply not in the input class. So the next thing is the amount of times clicked. So if I click really fast, you can see it triggers twice. Now the reason that it triggers twice is that you want your mouse to be responsive. You don't want it to wait for every double click, because there's a set time between a single and double click. So this only happens if there's 2 clicks that happen shortly after each other. But if you only want to use this one and not to use this one, you would simply have to check if it's clicked twice. And the reason why this is fired is because you want the mouse to be responsive. So whenever you click, you don't have to want to wait every time for a double click if you don't need it. So that's a way of using the mouse click to determine if it's double click. Now there's a few more that are interesting. The mouse dragged and the mouse moved. I'm not going to go into detail, but the simple way to put it is whenever you move your mouse between updates, so as you can see, 2000 frames per second means 2000 updates. If I move my mouse between 2 updates, which can happen over here, which can always happen, it's gonna give me the old X and Y of my mouse position and the new ones. The same happens for mouse dragged, but this one only triggers whenever any key is pressed on my mouse. So this goes for the left or right mouse button, same for middle, so keep that in mind. Another interesting one is the mouse wheel moved, and we're going to take a quick look at that. And public void mouse wheel moved integer change, and let's just print a change here. So restart our game, and what you're going to see is whenever I move my mouse wheel, it's going to tell me if I'm scrolling up or down. So whenever I'm scrolling up, it's going to give me a positive integer, and scrolling down a negative one. Now, because I have a lot of frames here, I can't physically move my mouse wheel farther than one click or one mouse wheel tick. Well, maybe I can, but as you can see here is that for this particular mouse, one click with your mouse wheel up, and this is something different for every mouse, it's going to give me a number. So as you can see, apparently I moved my mouse wheel 3 clicks upward here. This is going to reset every time it gives you an update. So whenever you scroll your mouse, it's going to give you the changed value, and then it's going to reset. So a good way of using this to use some kind of scrolling in your game, like zooming in and out. Well, that's it for the mouse input basically. And now for the moment you've probably been waiting for. How to get that controller working in Slick2D. So whenever we start our game here, we can see the information from Slick2D. And you can see here, controller's not available. Well, we can fix that. And we can fix that by adding another library. So right click on your project, go to properties, Java build path, and add a jar file. Now you can find that included with the lightweight Java game library. It's called the JInput, and basically it's a small library that adds functionality for external controllers. So whenever we start a game now, you can see it's going to tell us that it found 3 controllers here. Well, we're actually going to use this one over here. Why it recognizes my keyboard as a controller, I'm not exactly sure, but it's obviously not a controller. So keep this list in mind, and what we're going to do now is, let's see whenever we're pressing the A button. So let's call the input, and what you can see here is there's 4 methods here. There's 3 methods for the first 3 basic keys, but as our controller has I think 10 keys, we're going to use the last method here. Now the first argument here is which controller it is. So let's say controller 1, and our controller over here, and we're going to say the A button. And whenever pressing the A button, we're going to say A button down. Now, as you can see, even though it is a pressed method, it's actually a button down method. Keep that in mind, it's a bit inconsistent with the key pressed and the mouse pressed. So there's also a method that actually allows us to use the is button pressed. And this is again the, let's see, controller and button pressed, and again an override method. Let's implement that. And this method, instead of having to know which controller we're already using, is going to tell us which controller is pressing the button. Now, for a single player game, you don't probably care about which controller is pressing the button. So you're only going to need this. And something that you can use to detect which controller we're using. For example, if we want to know whenever the A button is down, we actually have to know which controller it is. It's something that you see in a lot of games. Whenever you're starting the game, there's something like press start to begin. And again, start is a button. And whenever you press start, it's going to tell us which controller is pressing start. So let's print out the controller and the button. And let's restart a game here. Now I'm going to press the start button here. And you can see controller 0 as press button 8. Now there's a number for every button here. So there's obviously A, which is gonna spam because of our method here. There's the B, the X, the Y, the left bumper, the right bumper, the select, start, left thumbstick down, and right thumbstick down, or thumbstick click. So you might be wondering, where are those triggers? Well, they're not in Slick2D. You can use those, but I'll explain that on the end. First we're going to take a look at how to use the thumbstick. So what we're going to do is, if input dot is controller up, and again it does need to know which controller we're looking at, and it's going to tell us whenever the controller is up. Now what you're going to see here is that it's going to spam controller up. Now I've just moved my thumbstick a bit and you can see it stopped spamming. This is because the default values of my controller are up and right, I think. So keep that in mind whenever you're starting your game, that the controller values could be off. And this is not necessarily only for my controller. I tested it with another controller, which is a wired one, and it had the same properties. So whenever you're starting your game and you see your character going upwards at the start without even touching your controller, you might have to check that the controller is properly initialized. So keep that in mind. You can see whenever I'm moving my control stick up now, it's going to say controller up. Now the plus pad does exactly the same thing. So you can control the same actions with the left thumbstick or the plus pad. Again, the right thumbstick is not available in Slick2D, which is quite a bummer, but you can actually use both the right thumbstick and the triggers if you're going to make use of the controllers that are built in the lightweight Java game library. However, because this is a Slick2D tutorial, I'm not going to go into detail about that. However, I'm going to show you a little bit of that, and what you're going to need is you're going to use the controller and the controllers interface from the lightweight Java game library, as you can see here. And what you're going to need here is the get controller. Now, because the lightweight Java game library doesn't work the same as Slick, because Slick is built onto the lightweight Java game library, and the list of controllers is different. Now, on my computer, the controller is actually on index number 2, and what we're going to need here is to actually import this. And as you can see here, there's no fancy and usual methods like is a button pressed or is whatever. All we have is the simple methods from controller is button pressed, and what this is going to do is it's going to take a number once again, And if we use this method and print out button A pressed, you can see that it works the same as the one in Slick2D. However, if we want to use the triggers here, they're not actually buttons. As you might know, the triggers can be pushed like halfway or all the way down, and because of that, they actually put it on one of the axis values. Now, what the X, Y, and Z axis are is the axis value of your left thumbstick. So, for example, the X value of the X axis is -1 to 1, and 0 being in the middle. So -1 being all the way to the left and 1 all the way to the right. The same goes for the Y, 1 being all the way up and -1 being all the way down. And the Z-axis is the trigger. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to simply print that out. And if we restart a game here, it's going to spam -1. So apparently the default value is -1. So whenever I just press one of the triggers, you can see it's going to 0. Now, using the right trigger here, it's going to go all the way to -1, and the left one is going to go all the way to 1. When I press both at the same time, it's going to go to 0. So another thing to keep in mind, you can't use both at the same time. That's just a little look at how to use more advanced controls from the controller. So for your basic game needs, you should try to use the Slick2D ones, but whenever you're gonna need more specific controls, you want to look at lightweight Java game library. I hope you learned something from this tutorial. I'm sorry that it's a bit long, but I wanted to make sure you got a good look at the different features of the in and output of Slick2D, specifically the input. And I hope you liked the video. And next time we're going to look at transforming our basic game into a state-based game. So hopefully see you next time. Bye bye.